Hello, this is Jason McKinney. This is my presentation on Ethiopia for Module 4 of our Foundations in Cultural Competence class. Disclaimer. This presentation is a compilation of information gathered on various websites over several hours. Much of the information in the slides is taken verbatim from those sites. The information is generally deemed reliable, but was not verified and is not guaranteed. Each slide has footnote references, and the last slide compiles those references for your convenience. Basic information and fun facts about Ethiopia. The country's landmass is roughly as big as France and Spain combined. Ethiopia hosts 70% of Africa's mountain ranges, and Lake Tana in Ethiopia is the source of 85 to 90% of the fresh water in the Great Nile River. Also, Ethiopia's high elevation may contribute to why the country is known for producing exceptional long-distance runners. The geography of Ethiopia is that Ethiopia is a landlocked country on the Horn of Africa, with a high central plateau reaching in excess of 13,000 feet high. The Western Mountains get summer rainfall, which is also where Lake Tana is, while the eastern side is hot and dry. Ethiopia borders 7 nations: Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, Kenya, Uganda, and Sudan. The political map displayed to the right shows that there are 9 ethnically based regional states. There are also, if you notice, 2 chartered cities. The regions are governed by direct election through regional councils, and the most populous region is Oromia, with more than 27 million residents. The country of Ethiopia is 437,600 square miles big. The origins. Ethiopia is the oldest independent country in Africa and one of the most ancient in the world. The Ethiopian Empire was established in 1137 and was known as Abyssinia, and wasn't officially named Ethiopia until 1963, although there were references to calling it Ethiopia prior to that time. It was conquered by Italy in 1936. Also notable is that during that war, Italy did use mustard gas in its conquest, and Britain invaded in 1941 and restored Ethiopian independence. Significance. Ethiopia is the most populous landlocked nation in the world. It is also the source of Semitic languages: Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Garage, etc. Ethiopia has the only indigenous script still in use in Africa today. Ethiopia hosts some of Africa's highest mountain ranges and the world's lowest points below sea level. And it is the only sovereign nation in Africa said to have defeated colonial designs. Religion. All right, so the religions of Ethiopia are as follows. Approximately 63% of Ethiopia is Christian. Predominantly, about 44% of that is Ethiopian Orthodox, while there's another 19% that are various Protestant, while 0.7% roughly is Catholic. Just under 34% of the country is Muslim. There are also a notable number of Beta Judaism followers. Now, these are those who were followed or were members of Judaism from antiquity, so many years BC. And most of the remainder of the population, in terms of percentage, is atheist or pagan. The slave trade. The slave trade was actually very predominant throughout the Ethiopian history. and it persisted just until the mid-20th century. The national legal codes actually enshrined slavery in the Ethiopian society and was sanctioned. The country actively exported slaves, and one anecdotal reference I found stated that at one point in the 20th century, Ethiopia was exporting as many as 45,000 young women per month into the Arab slave trade. Slavery was officially abolished August 26, 1942, and the timing of that would indicate, since it immediately or relatively immediately follows Britain's restoration of independence in 1941, that might have been contributory to, in terms of political influence, for abandoning slavery as an institution. In terms of colonialism in World War II in the 1880s, Italy had failed to take Abyssinia as a colony. However, in 1935, Mussolini did invade Abyssinia, and it was annexed to Italy. The emperor appealed to the League of Nations in 1936, but many members recognized the colonization, ironically, including Britain. However, in 1941, Britain did invade and help restore independence to Ethiopia. And Ethiopia, in the references that I had read, was considered occupied versus colonized because it was a period that only lasted 4 years. The political structure of Ethiopia is that it's established as a constitutional democratic government, and that was established in the current constitution was established in 1995. It does feature a bicameral parliament, a constitutionally independent judiciary, and an executive prime minister. And prior to that, it was actually previously one of the world's oldest monarchies still in existence. The economy of Ethiopia is comprised primarily of agriculture and service industries. However, agriculture though GDP is split between the two, the agricultural industry substantially dominates in most definable ways. Agriculture, of course, accounts for 45% of the nation's GDP, services also 45%, and industry 10%, with manufacturing as a portion of that about 6 to 7%. So it is not very big. Approximately 45% of the landmass of Ethiopia is arable land, but only about 10,500 hectares are actually cultivated. Also interesting is that the agricultural industry in the country accounts for 85% of the total employment in the country, even though it's only 45% of the GDP. Demographically speaking, Ethiopia hosts a population of a little over 86.5 million people as of 2013, and has a growth rate of about 2.9% annually. It's got a birth rate of 33.5 births per thousand population as of 2012 estimated, and a death rate of 7.8 per thousand. Obviously, the difference there would definitely represent a population increase over time. The life expectancy of Ethiopians is reasonable at 60 years, with males living to about 57 3/4 years old on average, and females living to about 62 1/3. The fertility rate amongst Ethiopians is 4.6 children are born per woman, and the infant mortality rate which is high, is 68 deaths per 1,000 live births. In terms of language groups, Ethiopia does have an official language, which is Amharic, which is spoken by 29% of the population. Orominga, which is actually spoken by a greater percentage of the population, is not the official language, but it is definitely a more dominant language, at least slightly by percentage. English is the most widely spoken foreign language there. And there were listed that there were 88 total languages of Ethiopia, 2 of which are already extinct, and 5 of which are in danger of extinction today. In terms of cultural strategies, my tactic was to browse looking for different travel tip type sites to really give some idea of, how does one from a more of a Western Hemisphere culture expect to interact, or some of the do's and don'ts that you might encounter while you were in Ethiopia. And here was some of the highlights that I had found. That you should shake your hand with the right hand, and the formal way is also to take your left hand and hold under your arm, under your right elbow, so as to support your arm. Also, to be modest in dress. Absolutely, they're a very modest culture from my readings. They also are very big on drinking coffee, and it does host some of the best coffee, it is believed, on the planet Earth. And if you are invited to someone's house to have coffee, it is polite to have at least 3 cups of coffee. In terms of don'ts, we do want to avoid touching people of the opposite sex, as it's considered inappropriate. Also inappropriate for women is showing your knees and shoulders. Also, PDA, good old public displays of affection. This goes back to their modesty, and their very conservative culture is not considered acceptable. And avoid using your left hand when eating, shopping, or shaking other people's hands, as that's considered very rude. One point of note, though, is that it is common in Ethiopia for friends and family members, of course, but friends and even good acquaintances to greet each other with a kind of a hug and a kiss on the cheek. And this is common also between men, just as it is between women, and between men and women, not so much, unless you're very, very close, like family. So here are the following references of the websites that were referenced in the creation of this slideshow. And I hope that it was interesting and informative. Thank you very much.